Hello YouTube viewers, welcome to my channel Science to Technology. In today's show, Camera Tuesday, we're gonna talk about camera flashes. So let's dive right into it. Well, first we have to understand what exactly we are talking about. Now, be very mindful, flash are also called by speedlight. So speedlight does not mean something any fancy hoo-ha, it's simply a different name for flash. Now, it's an extra controllable light. Think of it this way. Let's say you are doing a bride and groom shoot in basically a location. You don't control many of the lights. Even if it's an outdoor, you can't do much there. But this puppy allows you to one light source that you can control in terms of intensity, in terms of even color if you want to. It gives you one controllable source. Now, it has independent power source. That means even if your camera battery is huge, it will not draw power from that. It's just triggered by your camera equipment. It has its own battery, and you have to be mindful of that you have to carry extra battery, extra charging system, backups of all that jazz. So it's an extra thing that you have to manage, but it does allow you to have your one portable light source. Another aspect is camera acts as a master. Basically, how many times this puppy is supposed to fire, how long duration is supposed to fire, all those things will be controlled by your camera. Camera will act as a master, and these puppy will act as a student. Does not matter whether you have one camera and 3 flashes or one flash on one camera. Camera will always be master. Now, because of this technology being so ancient at this point in time, there is a lot of variety in terms of power and features. Heck, some has literal physical moving lenses in their hood system, where if you press zoom button, it will actually move the line. So your beam pattern will go from like this to like this. So it's quite amazing. There is a lot of research and development went into this technology, lot of it by a lot of other manufacturers. So it's a pretty advanced tech. Now, be mindful, this is a complex puppy. So to simplify it, there is a simple system which we call manual flashes, and it's a simply dumb system. You control it, that's it. There is nothing fancy about it. It will only be triggered by your camera. It has nothing. It's just like, tell me how bright should I be, tell me how long my duration should be. It's like everything you have to tell it. It will have a knob on behind it, will control the throw, it will control everything, but you have to do it for every flash. Or you can set it like it's evening, I'll set it for, let's say, medium intensity and just going YOLO. Then it's night, you will increase the intensity, but everything you have to do. Benefit, this will work on any camera. So basically you can buy something that works with Panasonic, Fuji, Nikon, Pentax, Canon, Sony. It will work with everything. So that's basic flash. That's very cheap, but nowadays nobody wants to buy that, because nowadays we have much advanced technology known as through the lens metering, basically TTL. Now this TTL is a simple auto mode. Basically it's gonna tell, if you press your camera shutter button, camera is gonna like tell the flash, hey, can you fire once? The moment it will fire that, it will collect data. The camera sensor will collect the data that I have fired the flash. Based on the fact that it has fired the flash, it will calculate all the data points. It's like, okay, I think I'm a bit overexposed or I'm underexposed. If it's underexposed, it will tell the flash, hey, can you pump it up? There would be a communication. So that's why these extra pins are there, because if you see 100-year-old camera, they had flash port, but it was like just 2 things, like one center pin and outer ground chassis. So these are for triggering on and off. It's similar in every camera. That's why manual flashes can be paired with whatever you want to do. However, for this TTL, you will have extra data pins which will have X-Sync, handshake, data, clock cycle, all that jazz, and those are used to transmit data, where it's like, dude, can you increase your power? Okay, awesome, increase your power. It's like, no bro, too overexposed, decrease your power. So all that data point will be transferred utilizing these data pin, not to the primary pin. Primary pin will remain the same, but data pins will be utilized for TTL. However, because of TTL, every camera company developed their own hoo-ha for camera system. So basically Panasonic has different, heck, older Panasonic has different, then you have Fuji, older Fuji is different, then you have Pentax, then you have Nikon, and then you have Sony, newer Sony is different, then you have Canon and cripple Canon, where they removed the center pin, because while TTL system, for let's say you buy a Canon flash system, Canon flash will work with Canon system, but Canon is like, hey, we have not crippled our customer. So what they did for very cheap cameras, if you pay attention to that, there is no center pin. That means they have successfully managed to cripple that 100-year-old ISO standard, and you cannot buy any third-party flashes with this puppy, unless some third-party flashes that are only made for Canon, they have figured it out how to bypass that. That was like, that's just a cripple hammer. It's like, dude, that's really bad. What they did is like you have a cheap camera and they're like, what if we made it extra cheap? That forces you to buy only basically Canon compatible equipment or Canon flashes, practically speaking. At that point, you are fundamentally locked into the system. So that's really bad. That's why always fundamentally ask people to just stay away from this. Canon is just not a good company. At this point, they are flat out exploitative. That's a really unnecessary thing. Like, heck, even Nikon D3100 does not have this issue. It's like, why the heck you physically re-engineered something? Like, they had to spend money to cripple this. That's really frustrating. But other than that, almost everything else will work on dumb mode. And in TTL, you have to buy for compatible brand. Basically, if third party is there, please check, do they support your exact camera model, not just brand. Because be mindful, newer Fuji and older Fuji are different. Basically, newer Sony and older Sony are different. Be very mindful about these things. So that's the whole thing you have to understand. For TTL, you have to have advanced basically brand matching, otherwise it will simply not work. And TTL, if mismatched, can destroy your system. Everything else, dumb mode, everything is safe, but the moment you use TTL, because these pins are data pins, they could have issues like, hey, I'm only expecting 1.5 volt on data pin, and let's say Pentax is like, hey, I expect 3 volt in those pin, and your flash is set for Pentax, it might just roast your camera. So you can understand, these pins are sensitive ones, so be very mindful. Please make sure you match the exact model. Then we come to another aspect. The flashes is a like extra source of income, so there is a lot of flash option. However, those start from ludicrously expensive to I don't even know why the heck anybody would pay that much money. So what do? Generally people buy third party. That's the reality. That's why basically Canon spends so much money into crippling that. It's just like nobody would buy Nikon or Canon or Sony. It's like, just there is a point after which it's like, dude, I can't pay this much money. It's like either I buy a new lens or buy a flash. So people many times have that issue. So third party started to offer some amazing features for amazingly low price. And if you are serious about flash photography, I would urge you to invest in this technology known as wireless function. Now how it's doing that depends. Like, sometimes you will have a flash that can only do wireless if your camera basically has its pop-up flash, which on lower end model it's a default thing. It will fire it using that light, it will trigger itself. Now benefit of that, it works super effectively, it's very cheap, efficient, almost every flash has that. Side effect does not work very well in outdoor environment. So if you have radio trigger, how does it trigger? Like generally you may have very cheap flashes will have a, hey, you have to buy extra remote that you will mount on your camera, then it will trigger that. So please be mindful of those things, but investing in a wireless function is a really good investment, long-term good investment. So if you can do that, please do that. Like wireless investment, it's a really good thing. Now we come to another high-end function. Now this is very high-end. Till this point you are spending money. At this point you are spending cars. So high-speed sync is something very serious. Now you only need that if you are exceeding 1/200th of a second. Now please read the camera manual, because every camera could have different. So generally that 1/200th you will find. If you are lucky, you will find 1/250th. If you are unlucky, you will find really worst case scenarios like 1/80th of a second. But I don't think any camera is that bad. But the reality is that is simply there because of how the shutter curtain works, not the shutter mechanisms, the curtain. Now curtain does not work like, it does not work like that. So what will happen is, like, down shutter will start to go down first, then it will stop, then the flash will fire, it will expose the system, and this will come down. Now this can only happen at the fastest 1/200th of a second. Now the moment you go to 1/500th of a second, the reality would be like this. It opens the shutter and its second starts to following. So you will have this dark zone where basically your flash fired, but whole section of the sensor was blocked by shutter. So you could have a scenario where only tiny beam is available, or sometimes you could have like weird things will happen if you basically try to use external flashes with higher than 1/200th of a second. Now how could you bypass that? Well, technically you can't bypass, because this is a physical limitation. This is an actual physical limitation. The only way to bypass that is either have aperture lens shutter, which are used in Hasselblad, so they will go like this, so they do not have blacking out issues, or have a global shutter, which good luck finding that on any camera nowadays. But what some people have figured out, because our electronics is high power and high density enough at this point in time, that somebody figured out, hey, what if I light paint in this sort of environment? So if you go 1/500th of a second, it will make flash, then make flash, then make flash. So all three flash will have enough of an overlap that you will get complete exposure. Now by that very fact, you should have understand that this is a very high intensity requirement. Your capacitors have to be ludicrously powerful to dump that kind of power, because to your eyes it will look one flash, but it will be like maybe it has flashed 5 times or 6 times, and it has to do that at full brightness. or sometimes even higher than full brightness, because again you're only exposing a very small section, and it would, like, for a duration of time, the tube has to go full intensity for very quickly. So ramp up and ramp down would be very sharp. So be mindful, the both camera and flash must be compatible with high speed sync. You could have a scenario where it's like, hey, high speed sync is not compatible with your camera, even though both of them say it. Please double check compatibility, because this is a very annoying thing. Another aspect is there is a limit. So even if you have high speed sync system, do not expect like every cheap camera and every cheap flash system to work at, like, let's say 1/2000th of a second or 1/4000th of a second. You could have a breaking scenarios, and cheaper flashes have a very good tendency to break at this kind of speed if you use them too much. Now again, once in a while, awesome, no problem, but if you are utilizing that feature repetitively, please try to invest in a good equipment. And you might be like, why do I need to go higher than that? Well, imagine it this way: you are doing daytime shooting and you are utilizing flash to fill a sort of fill light. Now everything is fine and dandy. The moment you open your aperture, your ISO goes down, but ISO can only go down to, let's say, 100th of a ISO. That's not low enough. Shutter, again, that's the first thing you will do is like, hey, what if I increase my shutter speed? You can't. That will be limited to 1/200th of a second. So there is a serious limitation, especially in daytime shooting. And even if you are not doing in daytime shooting, in some other scenarios, if you want to freeze the action, you have to bring it down. So in those sort of scenarios, if you are doing these two things, you have to invest in high speed sync system. Otherwise, it's not necessary. And is it good to invest in that? Up to you. If you are doing product photography, people photography, you don't really need that. But again, if you really want to push your skill, that's a good tool. But be mindful, this puppy is expensive, so make the judgment on your own. As a starter, I would never say invest in this, but like, if you have a lot of money, then go bonkers. Then we come to the principal aspect of it. Now, the worst place for camera flash to be is on top of your camera. Now it does sound odd, it's like, dude, it was designed for that, but like, yeah, it's a really worst place for me. Like, that's how you spot a like amateur photographer versus a new one. Like, amateur photographer, everything would be light, would be like this, your lens would be like this, it's like, and every photo coming out of that camera would be like burnt out. Like burnt out as in, like, it feels low contrast because shadows are not there, it feels weird, just burnt out. And I had this issue, like one of my family had a birthday party and a photographer was there taking all the shoot. All those photographs, even all the ladies that were wearing amazingly delicately worked saris, those saris were really well colored and everything was awesome, everything was burnt. Like, I had to bring all of them in Lightroom and try to crank up the saturation, then reduce the highlight. Like, I had to fix them to make them presentable. It's like, it looked almost like a burnt, so to say, overexposed kind of scenario. So that will happen if you are not careful with the flash. So that's how you will start. Now that's very good. The camera on the pointing forwards, very good for technical documentation. If you are taking a photograph of a brick wall or documents, equipments, things of that nature, go YOLO on that. But for people, try to avoid that. That's the worst thing you can do with people. So that's why one thing you have to understand, you have to let go of your flash. Basically, your flash is an independent unit. The moment you start to think in that terms, now you have unlocked a new level of photography. The moment you remove that, it's like, awesome. At that point in time, you can do amazing things with it. Basically, even if you're talking about food photography, you will always see people have flash somewhere else. And let's say I have provided videos down there where you see people have like a flash mounted on a stick and they are like, pointing it somewhere else. Like, I have seen people use a lot of amazing things where they had two flashes and a couple there, and the couple, like, they selected the color, basically which color was the favorite of the the individual. So it was like, bride had this color, groom had this color, and they utilized those color on the opposite side, and that was exposing the scene. So one person was exposed in one color, another person was exposed in another color. It was amazing contrast. It was like, damn. So people do this sort of thing. Or sometimes you will have those color system itself, but you will have very subtle highlights, like, here has a little bit of red and green, like, bit of a halo of blue lights. Awesome. Those things will happen only if you have the luxury of taking your basically flash away from your camera body. That's why I specified spending on wireless. It's actually for a starter, it's much more useful to have wireless than to have high speed thing. So be very mindful about that. And there are many flash accessories that also helps you to control it. Basically, you can have light bulb where it's just a silicone ball on top that helps you to diffuse light. That's a really good if you have no other option. If you don't have a second assistant or things of that nature, that may be your only salvation option. So that is understandable, but there are a lot of accessories that will allow you to handle things and do things. And sometimes there are advanced settings in a very basic flash. For example, end of exposure shutter flash. So what does that mean? That means, think of this, let's say people are dancing or somebody is doing a karate pose. You could have a shutter that is like, let's say 1 second, and the flash will only go for, let's say, 1/300th of a second, but it will do at the end of that flash. So you will have a lot of motion blur, person is coming into focus, and bang, flash goes, everything is freeze frame, you have a lot of motion blur plus that sharp action, everything looks amazing. This is really good and commonly done with basically people who are dancing and all that. You will notice that like some magazines, they will have photo like people are dancing and the person like who they are focusing on, somehow they are frozen. That's because flash fired at the last moment. It's like shutter went open and flash is like, I'm waiting. Let's say it's a 1/10th of a second. It's like, I'm waiting, almost fire. At that moment, it gets that done. So it's quite amazing. You can do amazing things even with a basic flash. And if it's wireless, go YOLO on it. So there are a lot of things you can do with this, and the first thing you have to do is get off your ass and do it. You cannot watch hundreds of videos on this. It will not make any sense. Just try to do it and then start watching videos like, oh, I can do this to make it better. So trust me, it's a very good system, and there is like a whole universe of possibility about this. So this was my presentation on basically flash photography. I hope you liked it, learn from it. In that case, please click the like button, share it amongst your friends. That will help me a lot. If you didn't like it, didn't enjoy it, I urge you to press dislike, press it twice to show me extra disappointment. Please leave a comment because I try to reply to all of them. Subscribe, press the bell icon if you're free, and as always, thanks for watching.